Okay, in today's session we will go through the amazing and relevant comments that the Piskei Teshuvos relates in halachos of Siras Omer.
Yes.
In Tough Pei Tet Sif Aleph. We've been working on this Sif for some time now. There's a lot going on, and we will basically go through what I thought. He has around 10 pages over here or so, and we will go through what I believe is the most relevant comments, summarizing them, which isn't necessarily repetitive of that which we did. It opens up in Sif Aleph that there's an idea of counting sefira for Kabbalistic reasons after the Seder. We discussed this weeks ago, when to count sefira. There's a Kabbalistic idea to count sefira after the Seder. However, many poskim, just going to move this down here to make room. Many poskim are of the opinion that this is not preferable to do. Not a preferable thing to do.
As we heard the Hasidim do it.
Okay, so we will let's see why it's not preferable and then why maybe you still could. There's a halacha in Sif Daled, which we have to learn more about next year during Sfira, that there's technically a prohibition to eat before Sfira. It's one reason. Another reason is that a person is likely to mess up. He's going to eat a lot. He's going to drink a lot at the Seder. You got 4 cups over there. And one could very easily forget to count
Yeah.
Sfira.
Well,
Another reason is that there is a mitzvah and a muvchar, as we have already discussed together. It's preferable to say sefira among many people. Berovam hadras melech. A lot of people give splendor to the king, to Hashem. So after the Seder, there won't be as many people that you're going to be saying sefira among, with. Uh, Another reason reason number 4, is Tmimos Tiyena. There should be a completeness on the day, which we already discussed in the past means that the earlier you count, as long as you're halachically able to count, is the better. So those are 4 reasons. Reason makdim la mitzvahs. You could add a 5th, obviously. You want to be quick to perform mitzvahs. So those are around 4 or 5 reasons why one should not count sefira after the seder. However, some justify this custom to count sefira after the seder if there is a minyan. There's more than 10 males who will be counting sefira together. In this way, you have a lot of people, so to say. You have Barovam Hadras Melech, probably not as much as you would have before the Seder, but you could say it's Barovam Hadras Melech. Furthermore, there's no concern that you're going to forget the count because everyone's going to remind each other. Everyone will remind each other. He says, practically speaking, those people who follow the Kabbalistic ways, um, there's an argument what to do in this case. After Mara, before the Seder, or after the Seder, Kol Avavos Toidos Hashem.
technically, everybody's eating before you used to count Sefira anyways during, most days.
Yeah, we're gonna have to come back to that in Sif Daled. That is a topic that we're gonna cover more in depth in Sif Daled. At the end of the day, he says you can do whatever you want, and this is some of the background information. If you're more interested in researching this topic, I would definitely recommend looking up all these sources in the footnotes that he quotes about, and you will see more details over there. It's one topic. Topic number 2. We learned together already in depth the Mishnah Brura that said, after Ma'ariv, you begin to count Sfira. The Shulchan Aruch says, if you forgot to count Sfira in the beginning of the night, you should continue counting the entire night. Footnote 7, they point out this is until dawn, the Shulchan Aruch Rav says. Which really is going to come up in a later sif. Until dawn, you would be able to count Sfira with the bracha, Amun HaShachar, Alos HaShachar. However, afterwards, after dawn, if you're counting Sfira, you would count without a bracha.
Hmm.
The Mishnah Brura said, which we spent a lot of time on, that you count Sfira before Alena. Before Alena, the Mishnah Brura said. So, because you get more Tamimos Tiyena, more of a completeness. Piskei Teshuvos points out in footnote 8, this is referring to people who are davening after 3 stars emerged after Seitzul Chachavim. However, if someone davens before three stars emerge, better to wait to do sefira till after Aleinu. If before Aleinu, it would not be before three stars emerge. We made that point. We were discussing sefira before Aleinu or after, towards the end over there.
Oh.
The end of this footnote, he says, some places they always count sefira after Aleinu because they hold that Aleinu is connected to Shemona Esrei, is connected to davening, was established because of davening, and sefira doesn't have to do with davening. It's an independent mitzvah that we just happen to do at the time when we are davening. That was what we saw in he quotes over here the Meiser Rav. We saw this in the Maluim, in the Harari Kedem. We saw this idea. Kui was quoted there. So that's the story over here. Points out back up top that this idea of Timimos Tiyeno, that there shall be a completeness. The idea over here is, okay, you want to do it immediately in the beginning of the night. Timimos Tiyeno. So the idea over here is that this doesn't just apply the first night of Seder. That you start the Seder off, that you count as early as possible, assuming that it's after the halachic time, in order to get a completeness. Rather, every single night there's this idea of getting a completeness. Every single night there's this idea, not just on the first night. Because according to many Rishonim, each night is an independent mitzvah. In many ways it is a Seder. Get a mitzvah each time you count. And therefore, one should strive to daven Ma'ariv as early as possible. Should try to daven Ma'ariv ASAP. That's the idea over here. Specifically during Sefira, in order that you could do Sefira as early as possible. Footnote 11, he quotes the Mor Ksiya. There's an idea of reason magdim the mitzvahs mitzvah bali adra al tachmitzano. You're going to be quick when it comes to performing mitzvahs in general. And furthermore, there's an additional idea of davening Ma'ariv earlier during Sefira to get the timimos of Sefira, to get a completeness of Sefira, as we discussed. However, someone who typically davens at what's called a minyan kavua, with a set minyan at Ma'ariv later, he davens every single night at 10 o'clock Ma'ariv. So in that case, the poskim say you do not need to count Sefira before that Ma'ariv minyan by yourself. 3 reasons. Number 1, Toda v'sheina Toda Yekodem. Like we saw in the Ber Halacha, the opening Ber Halacha of this siman, something that is more common precedes the Gemara in Brachos 8th parak. So therefore, Shema and Shemona Esrei are more common than Sefira. Second reason is Sefira needs to lichachila be done in a tzibur and barov ha'am. Sefira preferably needs to be done with a lot of people. And reason 3 is Sefira is a davar hanishkach bekalos. It's something that could easily be forgotten. So if everyone will be able to count individually, immediately after, in the beginning of the night, person might forget. As opposed to if you're always doing it with a minyan, it's unlikely that you're going to forget. Like people always say, how could you forget, nowadays? You're always davening with the minyan. Especially you have all these reminders during the week on your phone. Shabbos, you don't have those reminders. But the idea is if you're always with the minyan, you're never going to forget. You always daven with the minyan. That's this point over here. So therefore, stick with your later minyan that you do. Okay, he says it over here in another point. Sefira needs to preferably be done with the tzibur. We're not going to go into this oath just because it doesn't apply so often. And that's a major discussion of itself. In footnote 19, there's an interesting case with the Shagas Arya. That they didn't see the moon until the last night that you could do Kiddush Lavana. And they saw it before Ma'ariv. Shagas Arya said, no, first daven Ma'ariv. Even though you might lose out on doing Kiddush Lavana. That's what also Chaim Volozhin did. So that certainly applies in the case of sefira, meaning
That was because of Tadar V'Sheina Tadar?
yes, but how does it apply to sefira? Let's say right now is the only time you can count with the congregation, but it's before your personal marriage. So according to this, you would still not count sefira with the congregation, unless there's a concern that if you daven marriage first, you're going to completely forget to count.
So in the case with the Megillah,
Yeah,
right? When we had that, I forgot it was the Chassam Sofer, I forgot it was another Behuda,
another Behuda.
another Behuda,
Yep.
right? So he stopped in the middle of Megillah
Yeah.
because it was a mitzvah overis, did we say?
Yeah, that was a whole discussion. We're gonna do Kiddush Savannah again, Bli Neder, because number one, it wasn't recorded, and number two, I just want to do it again. It was so enjoyable.
Yeah, no, so I'm just trying to see how that stems with here, right? Because there we said we stopped the Megillah, I guess mitzvah is not Tadir. Is that why? So they do the mitzvah overis because that's Tadir?
Right? Yeah, Kiddush Savannah would be more common than Megillah as opposed to here. That is, yeah, that is an interesting
Yeah,
thing to
that's
tie
how it
together.
was. Yeah, okay.
By the way, I didn't type this idea in the notes that I have, which we're gonna finish up in the last time. Um, come to think of it, trying to think. I mean, I didn't type up any of this. Question is this Seder thing I'm not gonna put in because we don't really count after the Seder. This idea of this topic over here, doing it earlier, I'm saying I don't need to. I'm not gonna put that in either. Let's see. So far, I can't think of anything that warrants necessarily going in. It says over here that preferably it's something that I actually thought about adding, but I'm not gonna. So that sefira needs to be done standing, preferably Shulchan Aruch said, b'diavad post facto. If you did it sitting, you fulfill your obligation because it's not a full-fledged drasha. Echel charmish bekama, al tikri bekama el b'koima. Time in the Gemara, we learned that was a footnote on the Be'er Halacha. Also, Hadam Mishabura. Preferably, you shouldn't lean on anything to the extent that if that which you are leaning on would be removed, then you would fall, because that would be smicha ki yeshiva dami. That would be considered like you're sitting. So, and preferably, you're supposed to stand for sefira. Zohar says that sefira is great. It's a great thing like Shemona Esrei, and therefore that's why you need to stand.
Hmm.
We discussed multiple reasons why we don't say Shechianu when we do sefira. The Ber Heitev says that we only recite the Baruch of Shechianu on something that there's pleasure and a happiness from. Unlike sefira, there's no happiness and pleasure. On the contrary, it's a zeicher lechurban, commemorates the destruction of the base of Mikdash, so to say. Another reason is that these days of Sira are Yemei Din, times of strict judgment. That's why the Korban Omer comes from barley.
That goes against the Ramban, though.
Which Ramban?
Isn't there a Ramban that says technically sphere is like the Chol Hamoed between
Yes.
Pesach?
So they answer that question. They answer that it's kind of both. How it could be both, which is interesting.
Okay.
Yeah, they meaning on the one hand it's a time of mourning, on the other hand it's a time of Chol Hamoed. Rabbi Olshin in the Yarech Lamoadim has a nice piece on that. How
Interesting how they established it. I mean, those days of mourning came, I guess, afterwards.
correct,
They came much
but they
later.
don't contradict. They complement. They complement. It's a build up. It's a build up. Sfira.
Okay.
This is this point. Okay, this is the most complicated part of something that we didn't cover. I want to save this for last. Let's come back to that. It's just overwhelming for me. Okay, there's a major discussion about women. We already discussed all of this, so there's no reason to see it again. Um, the Magen Avraham says that women accepted sefira on themselves. I mean, the only thing is to see this footnote. He has a very nice presentation of the Shita of the Ramban. Let's just remind ourselves the Rambam and the basic consensus among the Rishonim is that the Seder is a time-bound mitzvah and therefore women are exempt from. Regarding that, the Magen Avraham holds that way, but he comes up with this idea of that they made it upon themselves like a mitzvah, and the Mishnah Berurah quotes this. Okay, so the obvious question is, how could you do such a thing? How could you obligate yourself in something that you were exempt from? So some question this Magen Avraham. Furthermore, the Zohar says that the women don't have a connection to this mitzvah of sefira. So he says if women are going to decide to count themselves, some go like this Magen Avraham, the simple understanding, then they need to be reminded so that they don't forget to count sefira. Right? They need to be reminded. Stipler, the females of his household did count. Should be pointed out that according to Sephardim, it's certainly prohibited for them to count with the bracha. Just like that Sephardi women don't make a bracha on any time-bound mitzvah. Kaf Chaim doesn't like the women counting. The Or L'Tzion says that even without a bracha, they shouldn't be counting. Like the Shas Chuvas Rav Po'alim says, they have no shaychus lezeh, no connection to this mitzvah sira. But no 42. Quote again, Stipler would do it in his house. It's interesting that he just quotes who would do it. He said that they would give a reminder that the women would remember to count. It's interesting he doesn't quote Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, that they wouldn't count Sfira. And he doesn't quote Rav Eliashiv here, who said that she could only count Sfira if she's wise, her husband is wise, and she's careful with her and scrupulous with her mitzvah performance. So it seems like he is going more one-sided here. He's pushing the agenda of if they could count, which is not so simple. At the end of the day, you could do whatever you want. There's what to rely on both sides, but he seems to be pushing it more one way that they should count, which I don't like. It's also against the Mishnah Berurah. Simple understanding is the Mishnah Berurah is that the minhag is for them not to count, and even if they will count, that they should not say a bracha. For two reasons. Number one is that they don't understand what they're saying many times, which could also apply to men. And number two is that they might make a mistake. What does that mean? They might make a mistake. Shema Yitu. They're not going to know the halacha is that if you miss one day, then you can no longer continue counting with the bracha, and they're going to continue counting again with the bracha. That was the concern of the Mishnah Berurah. Back to the Magen Avraham. And back to the question of, wait a second, men might also not know the translation of Sfira. Why doesn't that apply to them? The answer is men are obligated according to everyone from the letter of the law. And therefore, they certainly need to count, unlike women, which are not. Discuss a little bit more this question that is asked on the Magen Avraham. They ask a question over here, and they say, wait a second. They ask a question in the Magen Avraham, how could you say that women accepted upon themselves to be obligated in the mitzvah of sefira if they're exempt from it? How could you obligate yourself in something that you're exempt from? So the Prima Gadim, the Minchas Chinuch, Prima Gadim suggests maybe it's similar to Marv. The Minchas Chinuch says no, it's not similar to Marv. Marv technically is a machlokes between Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Gamliel. Rabbi Gamliel says that Marv is a chayv, is a obligatory. Gemara Brachos Chav Zayin Beis. Rabbi Yeshua says it's rishus, it's optional. What does that mean? It's optional. Tosfos says if you have another time-bound mitzvah, time-sensitive mitzvah, you should do the other mitzvah and then come back and do Marv Shmona Esrei later. According to everyone, Shema is a chiyuv midaraisa. It's an obligation from the Torah. As the pasuk says, "Bar dvar mishif leisach b'lefter b'derech ubeshach b'cha uvkumecha." So we know from ubeshach when you're sleeping that it's going to be a full-fledged obligation to recite Shema from the Torah. But Shemona Esrei is a machlokes. But all the Rishonim say that nowadays we accept it upon ourselves as an obligation. So seemingly that would be a good proof, just like we were exempt from Marv, and we accepted it. So too over here, women in Sfira. The difference would be over there by Marv, you had an argument to begin with, and you had a legitimate opinion who said that you're completely obligated in Marv. Unlike by Sfira, we never had such a thing. No one really said that women were obligated, so that would be a difference. Maybe based on a maharil, you could say that it's similar to shofar. Shofar women are exempt from income because it's time bound, but they accepted it upon themselves. So too, they accepted sefira upon themselves. The rebuttal to that would be no. Maybe the sefira is much of a harsher terminology that's used. The Magen Avraham says, "Kvar shavyor layu." They made it upon themselves like a full-fledged obligation, which isn't necessarily the case by shofar. So this topic requires a little bit more research. If you followed all of that, great. I just said a tremendous amount in a small amount of time. Everyone there?
Yes.
Yes. But I
The
didn't. I'm here, but I didn't hear the. What was a tremendous amount? All
Look at this
right.
footnote over here in 38. He says it's well known the Ramban. The Ramban says that the mitzvah of surah is not time bound. So they already asked a question. What does that mean? Of course it's time bound. So the Divrei Malkiel, which we learned, says it's a mistake in the Ramban. It said Mem Tov Ayin, which stands for Matanos Aniyim, or was written Samach Hey Ayin, Seder Avoda, meaning that women are obligated in karbanos. But the editor, the one who reprinted a better version of the Ramban in text, made a mistake and thought that it stood for Sefira. This was a mistake. So one answer, the Avnei Nezer, the Sakachavar, and the Shilos Chuvas and Shimpei Dal, which we already learned, answers. Sfira, the Torah says you do it after basically the first day of Pesach. You start on the second night of Pesach, right? So women are obligated in Pesach and not in Maror. So therefore, Sfira is connected to that. Okay. It's also an insight because it seems like it's still time bound, but okay. Shal Shuvin Kivin Torah says that Sfira is dependent upon bringing the Korban Omer. Anything that is dependent upon a time and something else. If something is dependent upon time, but something else prevents it, women are obligated in. Like the Tur Yevon discusses in Megillah. Okay, that also is an interesting concept. The Sefer Imri Shefer says, quoting the Maharam Chalawa, explaining this Ramban, that women are obligated because the Zman isn't goyrim. The time isn't causing it, it's the maisa, it's the act. Elaborating on that idea before, meaning it's the act of bringing the korban. V'hagam she'korban talui bizman. Bringing the korban is dependent upon time. Nevertheless, the sefira itself isn't dependent on a time. It's dependent upon an act of bringing the korban. That's why we're counting. Zeichel Mikdash, remembering bringing the korban omer. So therefore, even though technically time is involved, since it has to do with the act of bringing the korban, it's not considered time bound. Perhaps that's another explanation in the Ramban. See, this could be something to add to the notes. I wrote down this Ramban, brief explanations to this Ramban. This could be another answer. I didn't write this yet. This I thought was actually one of my favorite parts. The Which more do we have? I just gotta pace ourselves because I want to finish this. Okay, it's pretty much just this. Um, okay, three more topics here. This is one of my favorite parts of this. This is a tremendous insight and something that we didn't really cover yet. So pay attention to this. Right over here, the Shulchan Aruch Harav says if you heard sefira from someone else and you didn't have in mind the guy didn't have in mind to fulfill your obligation with that, and you didn't have to right when he was saying sefira to fulfill your obligation, you didn't have in mind to fulfill your obligation when you listened to it. You were just listening. So if you're going to count again later at night, don't count again with the bracha because shemeh ka'oina. Listening is like answering, and even if you thought I am not going to intend to fulfill my obligation with the sefira, that would not help. Because some say that mitzvahs ain't srichas kavana, that you do not need intent to do a mitzvah. And therefore, even without having the intention to fulfill your obligation, you would still nevertheless fulfill your obligation.
That would kill everybody.
That's right. Unless, concludes the Shulchan Aruch Harav, You have explicit intention that I am not going to fulfill my obligation, because that's what you need if you hold mitzvahs ein srichos kavana, that you don't need intention when you perform a mitzvah, which parenthetically is not a we paskin, as we discussed in Siman Samech. Mishnah Berurah Sif Katan Yud over there, but nevertheless, this is certainly an opinion to contend with and to worry about, as we discussed on length over there, recordings on RabbiBlan.com, and we will get through all this again, Amir Hashem.
So according to the Shulchan Aruch Harav, everybody thinks after when you're doing it after Oleinu, you have to have negative kavanah, or else you're out of.
Oh, yeah. That's the point that he makes over here. On the top left, he says this is a shita mechudeshes. This is a new opinion that we
Wow.
do not find in other poskim. It's not enough to say that you do not want to fulfill your obligation, thinking that you don't want to fulfill your obligation. Rather, you have to think about the intention of not wanting to fulfill your obligation. Meaning, it's not enough to say or to think, I don't want to fulfill my obligation. You have to have an explicit focus saying, not only am I not yotzi, but I don't want to fulfill my obligation, something like that. You need a strong reverse intent, rather, accordingly. It's fitting for anyone who's scrupulous with their mitzvah performance. When he hears the bracha of the chazan and counting sefira, he should have this negative intention that he does not want to fulfill his obligation, and be careful to say brachu baruch shemo. The chazan says bracha Hashem, and then you say brachu baruch shemo. Elokeinu melech haolam, sher kedeshanu b'mitzvosav v'tzivanu al sfiras haomer. You say brachu baruch shemo. Because saying Baruch Baruch Shemo is Gilui Das, that's revealing that you don't want to fulfill your obligation. Not like many who don't say Baruch Baruch Shemo. It's another discussion. What's the source of saying Baruch Baruch Shemo? Where does that come from? But in order to justify the custom that doesn't have such an intention, we can say, wait a second, the custom is this way, not to fulfill your obligation from the chazan, and therefore it's as if everyone had explicit intent not to fulfill their obligation from the chazan. However, even with this limud chus trying to justify everyone's actions, this is only referring to someone who is davening in this minyan right now and making the bracha right now. However, if someone is not making the bracha right now with this minyan, similarly, if someone is just walking by, he's walking through a shul and he hears the bracha of sefira and them counting, he has explicit kavanah, explicit intent not to fulfill his obligation. And if he didn't have such an intention, according to the Shulchan Aruch Harav, he should not be saying a bracha later on when he counts. He should ask someone else who's counting to fulfill his obligation with the bracha. But some say that even with this, you could say the bracha by yourself, even in this scenario, because nowadays, everyone's intention is to fulfill their obligation with the bracha. And it's as if, because nowadays everyone fulfills their obligation of sefira with the actual bracha that they say, and it's as if a person explicitly intended to go down this route. Just one more comment, and then we can schmooze about this a little. In footnote 48, he says one chacham told him, it's possible that you could have this intention all the way in the beginning of sefira, that every single bracha of sefira that you're going to hear to until the end of sefira, you're having explicit intention not to fulfill your obligation with. In other words, look, this idea of the Shulchan Aruch Harav is a real idea. There's a real concept of this. And furthermore, accordingly, one should say Baruch Hu Baruch Shemo. We don't see that being done, and one should have explicit intention not to fulfill his obligation when the Chazan says the bracha. However, if someone didn't do this, it's still fine. Because we assume you had this intention from the beginning of Surah, you have it in the back of your head every single night, and therefore, even according to the opinion who says mitzvah saying tzrichos kavana, you don't need intention to fulfill a mitzvah, you still wouldn't fulfill this mitzvah. Because it says if you're having the reverse intent.
Is this dafka by sefira he holds this, or by any bracha by a mitzvah?
Yeah, any mitzvah. According to mitzvahs, ein srichas kavana, and this idea, just like many other concepts in sefira, such as standing for mitzvahs, etc., could be applied to other mitzvahs.
What about the concept, that the shliach tzibur is supposed to have you in mind, right? So if you're just passing by, or you're not even in the room and you're hearing it, how can you say that shliach tzibur has you in mind to be yotzei the mitzvah?
Very simple. Because just like in most streets on the roads, it's two-way street, so too over here. He could have you in mind all he wants. However, if you are not having in mind to fulfill your obligation, and if you're doing even more than that, you have minimally in the back of your mind from the beginning of sefira, which by the way I do because I know about this already before. If you have this in the back of your mind before sefira, even on the first night, that you are not going to fulfill your obligation at all with the chazan, you're kind of using him as a reminder to say what night it is of sefira and to count with the congregation, then you would not fulfill your obligation, even if he has in mind all day and all night to cover you.
No, but I'm saying the opposite way. By the shliach tzibur, who says he has you in mind? You're not in the shul. You're just hearing from all the way outside.
It's his job.
What you just said is an oxymoron. David's right. You just said shliach tzibur. In English, that means a messenger of the congregation. That's really why he's there. That is his
Yeah, but
job, as
you're
David
not
just
part
said.
of the congregation.
You
You're
are
not
part of the
part of the
congregation.
tzibur.
You're there. What do you mean?
We just talked about that. If you're just passing by, right? You're in the outside and you
Okay,
hear
you're
the.
passing by, but you're still in the building. You're still there. You can fulfill your obligation, right? When we were talking about Gal Yisrael 2 weeks ago, didn't get one view. The only thing I put up didn't get one view. Shai wanted to do it. It was a hit and run. He came one day. We put it up for him. We did a whole presentation. What do we say? A reason why saying Gal Yisrael out loud is just because there's a random guy walking through. So now we could say Amen.
Maybe the shliach tzibur has anyone who's in earshot. You know, he doesn't even.
Yeah,
He's not anyone
yeah,
who's in earshot.
yeah. Be Mazaka happen. Let him answer. Chazan is there. Let's say someone like we saw in the Shire at Sion earlier. If someone about the topic of personally counting or being Yotzei Shemei Kohen filling your obligation by listening to the Chazan, we said the Shire at Sion. The Chazan's up there. If someone has a doubt, he's not sure if he should say a bracha on Sefira or not. So now he can listen to the Chazan and he'll be Yotzei. He'll fulfill his obligation with the Chazan's bracha, and then he'll count himself after. According to everyone, you could fill your obligation by listening to the Chazan by the bracha. Yeah.
I don't know. I'm still suspect of that, but all right, that's what the Rav
Suspect
said.
of what?
I don't know. We say that if you're not in the room, right? If you're not, you're not in the shul, right? And you just hear brachas, technically, you're not Yotze, right? You're talking about the Kiddush. You have to be in the same room.
Right. This is in Kiddush, right? You're in the same room, anyways,
So
right?
I'm
It
saying
actually,
it
it actually
sounds.
brings up a shaila. Is if you're davening in a room that has mezuzahs,
Okay. Ask this after because I want to finish this. Ask this after mezuzahs. Okay.
uh,
Wait, what did I want to say? One more thing. This reminds me is also Siman Samachay. If you're in a room and you have nothing to do with that minyan, and as soon as you come in, they're saying Shema, you're supposed to say Shema with them.
I said that's because you're in the room, but here the Shulchan Aruch Harav was saying that you could just be hearing it from the outside, just passing by, not in the room.
Correct, because you hear it. Mitzvahs don't need kavana. You hear it. Shmei Kona.
And you're saying the Shliach Tzibur has in mind anybody who's passing, anybody in the
Yeah.
world.
Yeah. That's why he's
Okay.
there. All right,
Okay.
let's look at two more things because we're running out of time, and there's a two big concept. We saw the Mishnah Berurah said if you don't understand what you are saying, even if you say it in Hebrew, you would not fulfill your obligation since you didn't know that what you're saying, right? Even if you did it in Hebrew, you have to understand the language that you are counting, and that's the whole point. So he says a tremendous insight on this, which I think is controversial halachically. And he says, if you know the amount of days that you're supposed to count, and you know that you're counting in Hebrew and you know the days, even if you don't know what you're saying, you fulfill your obligation. He quotes over here the Maharil Diskin in the Shalos and Shuvas. In his Shalos Shuvas Kuntra Sachar and Simon Hay. Sukkot and Nun Hay. I think that's very controversial. It's not a simple explanation at all. He says it's correct that you should learn the days and the weeks and how to count. And if you don't know some of the words, then you should count the days and the weeks. And if you don't know any of that, right? Then you would not fulfill your obligation. In other words, difference between you know the day, but you just don't know the language, versus if you don't know nothing. If you don't even know what words you're counting are the days of the weeks, and that's certainly an issue. Many argue on this and say that no, if you count in Hebrew, It's tremendous leniency. You fulfill your obligation regardless, even if you don't understand. I think that's very halachically questionable. Some say you have to worry about such opinion if that would happen, and therefore, if you would count and you wouldn't really know what you were counting, when you recount again after in a language that you understand, you would not count with the bracha. I thought that was interesting. Okay, the last topic we're going to cover um, is going to bring up a lot of interesting conversation. And I just want to say everything that we did until now, I'm very comfortable giving a halachic sack on and formulating my opinion. I am not afraid at all about that. This specific topic that we're going to be learning in the next 3 minutes, I am saying right now, I'm not ruling one way or the other on this. I'm just going to relate some of the information. This topic requires a lot more research and is complicated. If someone is traveling from one location to another location and they are passing what's called Kav HaTarich, I think the English name for this would be the timeline, right?
Ooh, maybe, yeah, it makes sense.
Is that the English term for it?
How long
Timeline?
is the time? I don't know how long the
I think it's the international
timeline's gonna
date line.
run.
International Dateline Shkoyach. So the question is, what do you do with sefira? You're gaining a night, you're losing a night. It gets complicated. What do you do?
Wow.
So
If you
there's a
fly to
massive
Australia.
discussion in the post about this. People travel nowadays for business, for leisure, for vacation. They're all over. So these questions become very relevant and they become very complicated. It seems like there are three different
No,
opinions. Aleph. Opinion number one, if another day is getting added, so then you count another time sefira that you counted the previous day but without a bracha. In the continuation of the days, you count with the bracha just like people of that location. And if you lose one day, so then from then and on, you count like the people of that location without a bracha, since you skipped one day. This is very complicated. Opinion number two, even if you're gonna miss one of the days, uh, you would um, you would still count the other days without a bracha, the day that you missed, and then you should count from then and onwards like that new place with the bracha. Opinion three, forget about it. Ein lo lehischashe b'mashi Yehudi hamakom. Don't worry about the people, what they're counting in that place. You need to continue counting what you were counting before in your personal sefira. You don't
Wow.
skip, you don't double, you don't do anything. Sefira is a mitzvah that's placed on the individual and has nothing to do with the place that you're going to, which comes out that you could still be counting sefira and it's actually Shavuos, which is a wild idea. From all of this, he summarizes and says, you want to worry about all opinions, and therefore do not cross the international date line, you said?
Yes.
International
yeah.
date line during Sphere. It's better not to.
It's only in
Uh,
only in the Pacific, right? You're in the Pacific. Go
Whatever
to
that date
Hawaii or
line would be.
Australia.
If Now, if you're not crossing that international line over there, the date line, so even though there's a difference between hours and everything like that, so just worry about where you are. You continue counting. That's not really an issue. But the problem is when you cross the date line.
Date line.
So, yeah,
If you
look,
fly to Australia,
yeah, exactly.
you
Look, there's
lose
a
a
lot of
day.
svarim that are written on this topic. It's very complicated. Something interesting that comes up with Sphira. So
I,
this
I
basically is a summary of around 14 pages or so of the Piskei Teshuvos on our first sif. You see there's a lot going on, and I tried summarizing it. That's all.
all right.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I, I want to read a sefer on. I want to learn a sefer on everything dealing with the Southern Hemisphere.
Yeah, they have plenty of farm that are written excellent stuff. All right,
Really?
so tomorrow we're gonna wrap up the Chazara, the review from the Word doc on this Sif, and then we're gonna probably move on to the halachos of Shavuos.
Cheesecake.
Uh, yeah, there really aren't so many halachos of Shavuos, to be honest.
I know.
Yeah, so
Cheese.
cheesecake. What's the halacha over there? You eat cheesecake, you know? It's
No,
custom.
eating up, staying up all night.
Staying up all night. Okay, so you gotta know halachos of staying up all night. Nothing to do with Shavuos,
Um,
right?
and
What halachos of Shavuos itself are there?